They laughed. Not with me at me. At my own granddaughter's wedding, my name tag didn't say grandma or mother of the groom. It said the wallet with wrinkles. I smiled for the photos. But inside something broke. I'm Evelyn, and what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, respect, and what we call family. Tell me, have you ever felt like you were only valued for what you gave? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And listen close. This is my story. The sun was just starting to dip behind the dunes, casting golden streaks across the sand, when I arrived at the Belmere Coastal Resort in Savannah. Zoe's wedding was the kind of event people whispered about for weeks beforehand. Crystal canopies on the beach, live string quartet seafood flown in from Maine, and a vintage glam dress code that made half the guests look like they were auditioning for a Gatsby remake. It was extravagant in that polished, curated way that never really felt warm. Still, I had told myself this was going to be a good day, a milestone, a memory. I'd even gotten my nails done pale peach tasteful. Something about that detail felt important. "Good evening, ma'am." A young woman at the guest check-in table chirped as I approached. She had a headset tucked behind her ear and a clipboard she clutched like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Evelyn Hart," I said with a smile, adjusting the shawl draped across my shoulders, grandmother of the bride. The girl glanced down her list. Here you are, 1 sec." She dug through a small wooden box and retrieved a name badge, the kind with a little gold clip and cream background bordered with calligraphy. My smile faded the moment I read it. The wallet with wrinkles. I blinked. The girl was still smiling, unaware. "Is that right?" I laughed softly, the kind of laugh you use when you're not quite sure if you're supposed to be in on the joke or the punchline. "Oh, I think there's been a mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice light. She tilted her head. That's the one we have for you. It was sent in ahead of time with the rest of the customized tags. Sent in by, one of the family members, I assume. Maybe Brandon or Zoe, my son, or my granddaughter. Either way, that stung more than I wanted to admit. "Do you want me to check if we can print another?" the girl asked, suddenly, catching the look on my face. I paused, smiled again. No. It's fine, don't make a fuss." I took the tag, gently clipped it onto my dress, and walked toward the entrance like nothing had happened. But something had, I just didn't have words for it yet. As I made my way through the glass doors into the resort's garden courtyard, voices drifted over the buzz of conversation and clinking glasses. "Oh my God, did you see her tag? Totally savage. They actually printed it." I thought they were joking. I stopped walking just for a moment, pretended to fix my bracelet, but my hands were trembling slightly. Near the bar, 2 20-something girls with matching spray tans and acrylic nails were giggling as they took selfies. One of them glanced at me, then looked quickly away. I took a deep breath and moved toward the tables, pretending I hadn't heard. Pretending was second nature at this point. Near the seating chart, I spotted a familiar face, Judith Halpern, an old friend from my bridge club. "Evelyn, darling, look at you," she said, rushing over in her floral shawl and oversized brooch. "You look stunning. What a venue, huh?" I tried to smile. "Yes, it's something." Her eyes drifted down to my name tag. She blinked, then looked back up quickly. "Oh," she began awkwardly. "Well, I'm sure they meant it affectionately." "Of course," I said, but my voice came out smaller than I intended. "You know how kids are," Judith added, trying to smooth it over. "They think they're being clever, just humor." I murmured, glancing at the table arrangements. "I guess I'll go find my seat." As I walked away, Judith placed a hand on my arm. "You know, Evelyn," she said quietly, "I've always admired how much you've done for this family. They're lucky to have you." I didn't answer, because in that moment, I wasn't sure they felt lucky. I wasn't sure they saw me at all. Not as a woman, not as a mother, not as Evelyn, just a purse on legs. A reliable checkbook with gray hair, a placeholder for someone who used to matter. I sat down at table 5 next to a couple I didn't recognize and stared down at the embossed dinner menu. Miso-glazed salmon fig and goat cheese tartlets, something called pear essence. The words blurred slightly. No one else at the table acknowledged the badge on my chest, but I could feel the weight of it, not just the pin, but what it meant, what it exposed. I turned my eyes toward the ocean, just visible through the arched windows. The tide was coming in smooth, relentless uncaring, and that's when it hit me. I used to think age gave you dignity. Now I wonder if it just makes you disposable. I adjusted my name tag not to hide it, but to keep it level. If they were going to laugh, they'd have to look me in the eye while they did. Let's see how funny I am now. The reception was held on a raised deck, overlooking the water strung with hanging Edison bulbs and decked out in pale linen and eucalyptus garlands. A 5-piece jazz band played softly beneath the hum of conversation champagne flutes, clinked like wind chimes, and somewhere behind me a photographer buzzed about capturing candid laughter and posed perfection. I'd taken my seat near the center table, a placement I was told earlier by the planner of honor. Strange how honor can sometimes feel like a spotlight you didn't ask for. The smell of grilled sea bass drifted through the air as plates were being cleared, and then the mic feedback squealed softly, a signal that something was about to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a smooth, familiar voice. "Brandon, my son." He stood near the sweetheart table, tuxedo, perfectly tailored tie, slightly loosened, like he wanted to give the illusion of being relaxed, though he never truly was. Brandon had always been polished, on brand. He smiled wide, raised a glass, and cleared his throat. "If I could have your attention for a minute," he began. People quieted. A few leaned forward. I didn't move. "I just want to say how beautiful this day has been, how proud I am of my daughter Zoe, and how grateful we are to all of you who made this possible." He looked around, made eye contact with guests like a politician working a fundraiser. "And of course," he continued, lifting his glass higher, "to my mom, Evelyn Hart, who has always made this entire dream wedding come true." A wave of polite laughter rippled through the crowd, then chuckles, then a full burst from someone at table 9. Someone actually clapped. I smiled. Of course I smiled, because what else could I do, even as something cracked inside me? So quietly no one heard but me. Brandon glanced in my direction, still grinning. "Seriously, y'all, she's the reason we have lobster risotto instead of, well, potluck." More laughter. "She's got that gold card magic." I laughed too, softly. My hands folded over each other in my lap, tight enough to leave crescent marks in my palms. Brandon raised his glass again. "To Mom, the MVP of Hart Family Finances." Someone shouted cheers to the ATM, and a cheer went up that made my ears ring. I felt Judith's hand brush mine under the table. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, eyes wide and a little sad. My jaw clenched. I reached for my water, pretending I needed a sip. When the toasts ended and the band launched into a Norah Jones cover, I excused myself from the table. Judith started to rise with me, but I gave her a small nod. "I need a minute." The laughter still echoed behind me as I slipped between tall white curtains and out onto the beach. My heels sank slightly into the sand, but I didn't care. I walked anyway. The wind was cooler now, brushing against my bare arms. I pulled my shawl closer. It didn't help. Out by the shoreline, just past where the tiki torches stopped, I saw a few guests standing around a fire pit. I kept my distance turned left instead, walking toward the darker, quieter end of the beach. I heard voices. I stopped. 2 silhouettes were near the dunes, close enough for me to hear far enough to think they had privacy. It was Zoe, my granddaughter, and her new husband, Trevor. "I mean, yeah, grand sweet and all," Zoe was saying, her voice half laughing, half whispering. "But she's basically the family trust fund. Like, they don't even pretend anymore." Trevor laughed. "She paid for this entire thing." "Basically?" Zoe said. "Dad gave a little, but it was mostly her. I mean, she doesn't spend on herself. Why not put it to use, right?" "Right," Trevor chuckled. "Hey, no judgment here. She seems harmless, rich but harmless." Zoe laughed again. "Exactly." Their voices trailed off as they walked the other way toward the party. I stood frozen in place, not from anger, not even from sadness. It was something else, like realizing you'd wandered into your own funeral by mistake. You're standing there fully alive, fully present, and no one sees you as a person, just an inheritance with a pulse. My hands tightened around my shawl as if it could hold me together. The wind whipped harder now. It smelled of salt and dried seaweed. I stepped closer to the water, letting the tide lap at my feet, feeling the cold soak into the soles of my shoes. Somewhere behind me a camera flash went off. Somewhere someone toasted the bride and groom again. But none of that reached me. I looked out across the horizon, the sky streaked with purple and rust, the sun now nearly vanished behind the waves. The world looked beautiful, and I felt invisible. I wrapped the shawl tighter. My name tag still hung at my chest, the wallet with Wrinkles fluttering slightly in the wind like it was mocking me. And that's when I whispered to no one, to nothing, to the waves themselves. Was I ever family, or just financing? The Sunday morning after the wedding felt strangely still, like the quiet after a storm, or before the next one. Back in Savannah, the city seemed to breathe easier than I did. Spanish moss swayed lazily in the trees outside my kitchen window. The sun filtered through like it always did, golden gentle, mocking. I didn't answer Brandon's first call, or the second. By the time the third one came in, I'd silenced my phone altogether and tossed it inside the bread box. Let it ring there. I needed space to think, to remember. I sat at my kitchen table in my robe, the kettle whistling gently behind me. I didn't get up to stop it, just let it cry for a while. Because I wouldn't. I'm a Southern woman, and a Southern woman doesn't cry. She plans. I pulled open the drawer beneath the microwave where I kept my old journals, leather-bound some, with frayed corners others barely touched. I chose the black one with gold trim, the one Robert gave me our last Christmas together. It had always felt too special, to use too sacred. Well, sacred had just been redefined. I opened the first page and began writing slowly, carefully, like each word needed permission to live. Zoe's violin, $1,200 for private lessons, then another $400 for the summer camp at Lake Windermere. I paused, then turned the page. Brandon's restaurant, $48,000 over 2 years. Loan never repaid. 1 year of silence, then Chapter 11 bankruptcy papers in the mail. Flip. Pamela's kitchen renovation presented as a birthday surprise, $27,500. She sent me a Pinterest board to get my blessing after the deposit was already paid. I reached for a highlighter, marking each entry not just with numbers, but with tone: green for guilt, yellow for manipulation, red for entitlement, and the red, my God, there was so much red. I flipped back and added color codes to earlier entries now with sharper eyes. It was like I was reading someone else's life, some poor woman who kept saying yes, while people smiled sweetly and salted the wound. The journal pages filled quickly, not with anger exactly, but with clarity, cold-cutting necessary clarity. A knock at the back door startled me. I turned to see Lorraine, my neighbor, holding a plate covered in foil. "I made peach cobbler," she said, her voice muffled through the screen. "Figured you could use something warm." I opened the door, forcing a smile. "That's kind of you, Lorraine. Thank you." She stepped inside, uninvited but welcome, as Southern neighbors tend to be. "You didn't look right at church this morning," she said, placing the dish on the counter. "Everyone noticed you skipped the brunch. That's not like you." I poured her a cup of tea. The wedding was a lot. I needed quiet. She glanced at the journal on the table, saw the color-coded entries. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. Lorraine was sharp but polite. "I heard Brandon gave a hell of a toast," she said casually, stirring her cup. I looked at her. "He did. Said I was the MVP of Hart Family Finances." She didn't laugh, just blinked slowly. "Huh." We sat in silence a moment, the air thick between us. Then she asked gently, "You ever wonder what would happen if you said no?" My eyes drifted back to the open pages. "I'm wondering it more lately." She nodded. "Good. Because, Evelyn, sometimes people don't stop taking until you make them." After she left, I returned to the journal and flipped to a fresh page. Across the top, in bold letters, I wrote, "What I've given and what they've taken," and beneath it, time, patience, silence, trust myself. I set the pen down, stared at the words, then underlined myself twice. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed, listening to the cicadas buzz outside, and thinking of how I'd ended up here, a woman loved only in the past tense, useful but not sacred, respected only as long as I paid for it. But something had shifted now. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something quieter, more dangerous, resolve. Sometimes clarity doesn't come with age. It comes with silence and a calculator, and I had both. The offices of Clarkson and Rowe were tucked into the corner of a weathered brick building just off Broughton Street, the kind of law firm where the reception chairs creaked and the scent of old leather mixed with stale lemon polish. It smelled like decisions, decades of them. I hadn't been inside since Robert passed. Just walking through the door felt like stepping into a chapter I'd sealed with his last breath. A young man at the front desk, new judging by his fidgeting, greeted me nervously. "Mrs. Hart, you're expected. Mr. Clarkson is in conference room B." I nodded but didn't smile. My eyes drifted to the portrait of Robert above the fireplace, one I'd insisted they hang after the funeral. He was still there, looking solid, steady, unreadable, just like always. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered. The click of my low heels echoed against the hardwood like a metronome. When I opened the door, the man inside looked up from a folder and smiled faintly. "Evelyn," he said, rising, "it's good to see you." "Same Thomas," I said, offering my hand, "although I wish I weren't here." He gestured toward the leather chair across from him. I figured as much. Mr. Clarkson had aged more gray, at the temples skin a little thinner, but his tone was still the same calm matter-of-fact. Careful. We sat. There was a beat of silence before I spoke. "I want to revisit the will." His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't question it. He simply reached for a yellow legal pad. "Yours?" he asked. I nodded. "Mine. Additions, removals, or complete restructure." "Somewhere in between," I said, exhaling. "I'm not here to burn bridges, Thomas, just to put up guardrails." He folded his hands together and leaned back. "You're not the first mother to sit across from me like this, Evelyn, but you might be the first who hasn't cried about it." I looked at him. "I did that already, in private." He nodded solemnly. "What do you want to protect?" I hesitated, then said softly, "What matters, not just what's expected." He sat still for a moment, then picked up his pen. "Walk me through it." I took a breath, then opened the envelope I'd brought. Inside were pages torn from my journal, not the personal ones, just the facts. The numbers, the pattern, the evidence. I slid them across the table. He scanned them quietly, eyes tightening slightly at the pattern, the asks, the amounts, the complete absence of repayment or gratitude. When he looked up, his face had hardened. "This isn't inheritance," he said. "This is consumption." "I know." He tapped the table with his pen. "Are you prepared for fallout? Because when you take away the gravy train, Evelyn, people don't usually thank you. They come at you with pitchforks." I smiled faintly. I've lived through breast cancer, a cheating accountant, and a war of inheritance when Robert passed. I think I can survive pitchforks. He tilted his head. "So what are you thinking? A trust with conditions, caps no," I said firmer now. "I want to add a clause, an automatic disqualification. If any direct heir child or grandchild publicly humiliates me, they're out. No second chances." He blinked. Define publicly humiliate. I leaned in, voice steady, mocking me at events, using me as a punchline, assigning me nicknames I didn't ask for, printing insults on name tags, anything that paints me as less than human in the presence of others. His mouth curled just slightly. "That's specific. It happened, and it won't again." Thomas nodded slowly, then scribbled something on his legal pad. "I can draft that in. We'll label it a respect clause." It's not uncommon in private wills, but enforcement can be messy. "I don't care if it's messy," I said. "I care if it's clear." He looked at me a long moment as if seeing me again for the first time. Not as Robert's grieving widow, but as Evelyn. The woman behind the name. "You're not afraid of them anymore, are you?" he asked. I folded my hands. I think I was never afraid of them. I was afraid of losing what little relationship I had left, but when that relationship is built on guilt and obligation, maybe it's worth losing. He set down the pen. "I'll file the amendment this week. You'll get a copy to review. Want me to notify Brandon or Zoe? I shook my head. No, not yet. Let them keep thinking the rules haven't changed. He leaned back and exhaled. Then this is the moment we wait and see, isn't it? It is, I said. Let's see who they are when they think I'm still who I used to be. He stood and extended his hand. It's been a long time since I've seen a client come in with their spine straighter than their legacy. I smiled this time for real. I don't want to be remembered as generous. I want to be remembered as smart. And as I walked back through the hall past Robert's portrait past the dusty coat rack, I felt it. Not just resolve, but power. Not loud, not angry, but permanent, like stone under water. The invitation came by text, not a call, not even a proper message. Just Thanksgiving at our place, 4 p.m., Zoe's bringing sweet potato casserole. Hope you can make it. Brandon. I stared at it longer than I should have. No would you like to come? No warmth, no punctuation beyond necessity, just obligation, wrapped in politeness, stuffed with expectation. Still I said yes. Maybe because part of me wanted to pretend we were still a family, or maybe because somewhere deep in my bones I knew what this dinner was going to be, and I needed to see it for myself. When I pulled up to Brandon and Pamela's house in Midtown Savannah, the driveway was already full. There were new cars I didn't recognize, sleek, metallic, overpriced. I parked on the curb and walked up casserole in hand heels, crunching softly against the gravel. Pamela opened the door. "Oh, Evelyn," she chirped voice, sugar sweet, but brittle. "You're early, no," I said gently. "I'm on time." She blinked, then laughed awkwardly. "Right. Well, come in, come in." The house smelled like cinnamon rosemary, and whatever candles Restoration Hardware was pushing that season. Everything was styled from the cranberry sprigs on the table to the custom place cards shaped like tiny pumpkins. I stood for a moment letting the warmth hit me, but it didn't sink in. Zoe came bouncing down the stairs in a rust-orange dress and ankle boots carrying a tray of deviled eggs. "Gran," she said, kissing my cheek. "Glad you made it. We weren't sure." "No reason not to," I replied. "Hope you're hungry," she smiled. "It's a feast. Dad went all out this year." I nodded, then noticed Brandon in the kitchen carving a turkey like a Food Network host. He glanced up, spotted me, and grinned. "Mom," he said, knife still in hand. "We were just talking about you." "Oh," I asked, setting my dish down. He wiped his hands, walked over, and kissed the top of my head, something he hadn't done in years. "Sit," he said. "We'll start in 5. The table was long candlelit, set with gold-trimmed plates and linen napkins folded into fans. I took my seat between Zoe and a neighbor couple whose names I couldn't remember. We prayed. We passed dishes. We ate well, they did. I moved food around my plate, barely tasting anything. And then, right after the cornbread stuffing and just before the pie, Brandon cleared his throat. All right, he said, tapping his glass. "We want to say something." I looked up, already bracing. Pamela reached for his hand. Zoe straightened in her chair. Something was coming. Brandon smiled wide. Too wide. "Mom," he began, "we're so thankful you're here tonight. You've always been the heart of this family. And the backbone." I raised my eyebrows. That phrase again, backbone. Not person, not mother, just function. He went on. "You've always supported us emotionally, spiritually, financially." Zoe giggled softly. Brandon continued, "Which is why tonight we wanted to bring something exciting to the table. Something new." Zoe chimed in. "I've been working on a business idea, a boutique lifestyle and apparel modern with a southern twist. Think Anthropology, but more curated." Pamela leaned in. "And Zoe's vision is just stunning. We've looked at spaces already, one on Forsyth Avenue. It's perfect," Brandon added quickly. "And we were hoping, just hoping you might consider helping. Just a seed like you did for college. We wouldn't ask if it weren't a real opportunity." I stared at him. At all of them. The pie sat untouched. The candles flickered slightly in the sudden draft of tension. I folded my napkin. Carefully. "I see," I said quietly. Brandon tilted his head. "It's not a huge ask, Mom, and you've always believed in Zoe. She just needs a boost." Pamela sipped her wine. Besides, you're not really using that inheritance, are you? I turned slowly toward her. Excuse me? She shrugged, too casual, too rehearsed. I mean, you live simply. You don't travel much. And let's be honest, you're not getting any younger. The silence that followed was razor sharp. Pamela leaned back. Guess Mom's saving for her casket now, she muttered, half joking, fully cruel. Zoe's eyes widened. Mom! But the damage was done. I placed my napkin gently beside my plate. Then I stood, not dramatically, not angrily, just intentionally. Zoe whispered, Gran, are you okay? I looked around the table at the people I had poured years into dollars into love into. I saw their smiles turn uncertain. Brandon furrowed his brow. Mom, sit down. We were just... No, I said softly, but clearly. I think I've heard enough. I reached for my coat from the back of my chair, sliding it on as quietly as a whisper. The room was stunned still. Zoe stood, voice shaky. Wait, you're leaving right now. I looked at her, really looked at her, and said gently, Yes, sweetheart, right now. Pamela scoffed under her breath. Oh, come on. I didn't respond. I didn't slam the door when I walked out, didn't toss a drink, didn't make a speech. I simply left the way women like me aren't expected to. Not in this family, not in the South, not after decades of keeping the peace. The air outside was cool, crisp, honest. As I got into my car, I realized something simple and astonishing. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clean. The kind of clean that only comes after you stop letting people wipe their feet on you. The knock came on a Wednesday just after 10 a.m. I knew it was Zoe even before I opened the door. The tapping was too light to be Brandon, too insistent to be Pamela. It had guilt behind it. I waited a moment before answering, not to be cruel, just to be still. When I opened the door, she stood there bundled in a long camel coat, hair slightly windblown, cheeks flushed. In one hand, she clutched a reusable coffee cup. In the other, a tote bag that looked more fashion than function. Hi, Gran, she said, voice tight. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in heels, clicking softly on the hardwood. The silence between us stretched like taut thread. Zoe finally broke it. I wanted to talk. I raised an eyebrow. About... She sat down at the edge of the couch, avoiding my eyes. About Thanksgiving? About the boutique? About everything. I crossed the room, slowly poured myself a cup of lukewarm tea from the kettle I hadn't bothered reheating. I didn't offer her any. I didn't come here to fight, she added, or to guilt you. I miss you. Her voice cracked, perfectly timed like a well-rehearsed audition, but there was no ache behind it, no tremble that came from the soul. I took a sip of tea, then said calmly, Walk with me. She blinked. Now, there's a path along the river, I said, setting my cup down. I go most mornings. It's where I think best. Zoe hesitated, then shook her head. I really don't have time for a stroll, Gran. I have a meeting in an hour. I was hoping we could just, settle things. My breath caught not from pain, but from clarity. I see, she sighed. I just want things to go back to how they were. I nodded slowly. You mean, when I said yes and no one had to pretend they loved me, Zoe looked wounded, or at least tried to. That's not fair. I tilted my head. Isn't it? She stood up, defensive now. You're twisting things. I came here to make peace. No, I said gently. You came here to ask again, but you dressed it in concern. Zoe stepped back, lips tightening. I don't know what's gotten into you. I didn't answer. I just watched her walk to the door. She paused, hand on the knob. Gran, this isn't you. I gave a sad smile. Maybe this has always been me. You all just preferred the version who didn't speak. She left without another word. I stood there for a moment alone in the entryway, the echo of the door closing still humming through the air, and then I whispered to the quiet, if love is only real when there's money, maybe I've been poor all along. That afternoon I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop. By 3 p.m., I'd found 3 nonprofit literacy programs in Georgia. One focused on adult education, another helped teenage mothers complete high school diplomas. The third partnered with local libraries to run after-school tutoring in underserved neighborhoods. Each one had a Donate Now button. I clicked all 3, not millions, just enough. enough to feel like my money was finally doing something clean. No name plaques, no interviews, no family approval, just quiet, giving. That night I drafted a letter to my estate attorney. Not a dramatic change, not yet, but the start of a shift. I asked him to begin researching anonymous trust options, ones that could be distributed during my lifetime. I wanted to give before I was gone, to matter, while I still had breath. Lorraine, my neighbor, dropped by the next morning with banana bread. She glanced at my cluttered desk, the legal pad, the charity brochures, and smirked. "You planning a hostile takeover, Evelyn?" I smiled. Just a redirection. She poured herself a cup of coffee. "Good. You deserve to make some noise before they write your name in granite." I laughed, really laughed for the first time in days, and deep in my chest I felt it, that stirring of something unshakable, something new. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about family. It was about worth, mine, and who I'd choose to invest it in. It started as most fires do, with something small, a mistake, an email, an intern named Joel who clicked reply all instead of forward. And just like that, my revised will, still in draft form, still unsigned, found its way to Brandon Hart's inbox. I found out 2 hours later. Lorraine had just left. We'd been sitting on the porch with iced tea and homemade scones when the sound of tires crunching gravel made me glance down the driveway. Brandon's SUV, too fast, too angry. He didn't knock. He flung the door open like he still owned the house he hadn't lived in since 1998. "Is this a joke?" he shouted, waving a crumpled printout above his head. "Tell me this is a joke." I stood up slowly from the kitchen table, brushing crumbs from my sweater. "Brandon," I said evenly, "it's not even 10 in the morning. Let's not yell." He slammed the paper down onto the table. "You cut us out. You wrote us out like we're strangers. You're giving your money to literacy programs and soup kitchens while your family gets crumbs." "No," I said, reaching calmly for my mug. "You get what you earned." His eyes narrowed. "Unbelievable." He paced, hands on his hips. "After everything we've done for you, all the years we looked after you." I laughed just once. Short, cold. "You looked after my credit score, not me." He turned sharply. "You've lost it. I've found it," I said, meeting his gaze. I found myself again. Brandon's voice shook now, not with sadness but fury. "I'll contest this. You know that, right? I'll take you to court." I stayed quiet, let the words hang. He stepped closer. "Hell, I'll file for conservatorship. Say you're mentally unfit. Look at you handing out money to strangers while your own family scrapes by." I sipped my coffee, slow, calm, deliberate. "You're not scraping by," I said. "You're scraping me." Brandon's jaw clenched. "That money is ours. Dad would have wanted it to stay in the family." I tilted my head. "Robert left it to me, not to your attitude." His face turned red. "You're going to die alone." I smiled softly, not sad, not angry, just, "Sure, no, I'm going to die on my own terms. That's the difference." He stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was to him. Maybe I'd always been. "You'll regret this," he said. I didn't respond. He left, slamming the door behind him so hard it rattled the window pane. By 4 p.m., the emails started. From friends, neighbors, church ladies. "Are you okay? Is it true what the news is saying? Do you need someone to talk to? Because yes," Brandon followed through. The very next day, he filed for conservatorship, citing mental instability, undue generosity, and disconnection from reality. His lawyers leaked the story to the Savannah Gazette. The headline, "Son of Prominent Widow Files for Control Amid Alleged Erratic Behavior." They used an old photo of me from the Rotary Club brunch, the one where I was blinking. I looked tired, maybe even confused. Perfect. I called Thomas Clarkson that night. He wasn't surprised. "This is the backlash I warned you about," he said. "He's coming hard." "I'm not afraid," I replied, "but I'm tired of being underestimated." He paused, then said quietly, "Then wear something sharp, because the courthouse is public." I knew what he meant. Image mattered now. I spent the evening choosing a dress, navy blue, high-collar, long sleeves, understated, elegant, unshakable. The morning of the hearing, I did my hair, light makeup, pearls Robert gave me on our 20th anniversary, and I walked out of that house not escorted, not accompanied, not afraid. As I stepped through the courthouse doors alone with my heels clicking like a countdown, I thought to myself, let them see the woman they thought they could silence. Let them try. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in tone. The kind of cold that doesn't touch your skin, just your pride. There were more people than I'd imagined. Local reporters, women from church, a man who used to mow my lawn sat in the back chewing gum with an expression that said I knew this family had drama. Pamela sat front and center in a mauve suit and pearls, too large for the occasion. Brandon wore a gray blazer and the face of a man who thought control was a birthright. I didn't look at them as I took my seat beside Thomas Clarkson. He leaned over. You ready? I nodded once. Let's get this done. The judge entered firm-focused mid-50s, the kind of woman who had seen enough family battles to stop being surprised by any of them. She glanced over the docket, then looked at Brandon. Mr. Hart, please explain why you filed for conservatorship over your mother, Evelyn Hart. Brandon rose confidently. Your Honor, we're here today because my mother, while beloved, has demonstrated increasing instability. She's changed her will in secret, given away large sums of money to obscure charities, refused medical evaluations, and cut off close family without cause. He turned briefly toward me. We're not doing this to punish her. We're doing this to protect her. He sat. The judge turned to Pamela. You've submitted an affidavit as well, Mrs. Hart. Pamela stood, smoothing her skirt. Yes, Your Honor. Evelyn, my mother-in-law has been forgetful lately, moody. She's withdrawn from family, and frankly, she's been spending recklessly on strangers. She donated to a poetry cafe in Virginia, for heaven's sake. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is that illegal? No, Pamela said quickly, but it's not rational. She sat back down, crossing her arms, a gesture of smug finality. The judge turned to our side. Miss Hart, would you like to respond? Thomas nodded at me, then stood. We'll be presenting witnesses, Your Honor, people who can speak to Evelyn's state of mind and her character. The judge gestured. Proceed. Our first witness was Marla Jennings, a former student of mine from the university. She stepped up, nervously clutched her purse. Mrs. Hart taught me literature in my junior year, she said softly. But, more than that, she mentored me. When my mother died, she didn't just offer condolences, she helped me apply for scholarships, checked in on me, made sure I didn't give up. She looked over at me, eyes shining. She's sharp, witty, fiercely clear-headed. If anyone in this room is losing perspective, it's not her. The judge thanked her and called the next. Mr. Langston, director of Savannah Reed's a children's literacy program. Evelyn's donation kept us from shutting down last spring, he said plainly. But she didn't just give money, she visited. Read to the kids, helped design our new space. He smiled faintly. She knew every child's name within 2 visits. You don't do that if you're confused. You do that if you care. Finally, Thomas called our last witness, Michael, my nephew, Zoe's cousin. He walked up wearing a plain blazer and jeans, nervous but steady. He took a breath. I'm not here to talk about money or who deserves what. I'm here because Evelyn Hart saved me. He looked directly at the judge. I was 17, lost, angry. My dad left, my grades tanked, my mom was overwhelmed. I was couch surfing between friends. He swallowed hard. Evelyn let me stay with her. No questions, no pity. She gave me chores, structure, books. He looked at me now. She didn't give me money. She gave me belief. She told me I wasn't disposable. Silence. Then, he added softly, so if you're asking whether she's of sound mind, all I can say is she's the only one who ever saw mine clearly. He stepped down, and just like that, the courtroom changed. You could feel it, like a tight band had snapped quietly but permanently. The judge leaned back, her expression unreadable. She looked at Brandon, then Pamela, then me. This court finds that Evelyn Hart is of sound mind, in full possession of her faculties, and under no legal compulsion to justify her charitable choices to family or anyone else. She paused. I suggest, instead of questioning her judgment, the petitioners reflect on their own. There was no loud applause, no gavel slam, just a ripple of breath from the crowd, as if the whole room had been holding it and finally let go. I turned slightly, catching the faintest glimpse of the window where the sunlight was breaking through the clouds, and beneath my breath I whispered, "Robert, I hope you're watching." 6 months passed, like sand through an open palm. It didn't rush, it didn't stall, it just moved softly, surely, and left space where grief used to live. Savannah turned from frost-tipped winter into dogwood spring, then crept into the slow bloom of summer. My house, once too quiet, now breathed again, not with noise, but with presence. I hadn't spoken to Brandon or Pamela since the courtroom. I hadn't returned their calls, hadn't read their statements to the press, though I heard whispers from church friends who still picked up the Gazette. Family betrayal, they'd called it. But they got the headline backward. Zoe, though, she didn't yell. She wrote. A letter arrived one Tuesday morning, cream envelope, my name in her handwriting, slightly crooked like she wrote it in one sitting. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before opening it. I told myself I'd wait, give it space. But by noon, I had the letter in my lap, unfolded, my thumb pressed into the bottom corner like it might anchor me to something. It was 5 pages long. Guilt poured out of every sentence, syrupy, clumsy, honest in places, manipulative in others. She apologized for the name tag, for the brunch, for the boutique pitch. She told me she missed me, that she understood if I never wanted to speak again, but she hoped someday maybe I could forgive her. I didn't write back, but I read every word, twice, and then I tucked the letter into a drawer, not to forget it, but to give it the weight it deserved. Quiet, not erased, not answered, just acknowledged. That same afternoon, Michael showed up with 2 canvases and a sack of peaches. Figured we could paint something, he said, grinning, as he kicked off his shoes by the door. On a Tuesday, I asked, raising an eyebrow. He shrugged. Every Tuesday. Thought we'd make it a thing. I smiled. Well, bring your own brushes next time. We painted in the sunroom. He liked color, lots of it. Sloppy brush strokes, big emotion. I preferred shadows, negative space, subtle shading. We met somewhere in the middle. He called me E, not Gran, not Grandma, just E. I didn't correct him. I liked it. It felt free. It didn't come with roles or history or expectations. It just was. He wasn't here to borrow money or fix anything or pry into the past. He was just here. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. One Thursday after he left, I found myself standing in front of the fireplace, staring at the old family portrait that had hung there for nearly a decade. It was taken on our 40th anniversary. Robert in the center, Brandon and Pamela on either side, Zoe, perched on a stool like a cherub. My hand rested on Robert's shoulder. I was smiling, but now all I could see in that smile was effort. I took the portrait down, carefully, slowly. It wasn't rage, it wasn't rebellion, it was release. In its place, I hung a blank canvas stretched pristine and wide. Visitors asked, starting something new. I smiled. Yes, and I was, not just with paints, with the shape of what family meant to me now, with the understanding that love can't be measured in blood or holiday invitations or heirloom china. It's in who shows up, when there's nothing left to take. Michael did, and every Tuesday after that I had proof in brushstrokes, laughter and silence that didn't need to be filled. The blank canvas wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. 68 candles is a lot. Too many to fit on the lemon chiffon cake Lorraine brought over that morning homemade, she claimed, though I spotted the plastic container in her tote bag. But I didn't tease her. I was just glad someone remembered. Michael had come by early with flowers and paintbrushes wrapped in butcher paper. We painted for an hour in silence, mostly the kind that makes room for memory, not guilt. He left before lunch, said he had work, but promised he'd be back on Sunday. The rest of the afternoon was quiet, just the wind teasing the chimes out back, and the faint smell of wax from the candle I lit for Robert. And then around 5:30, I heard the knock. 3 taps, soft. Too polite to be Brandon, too tentative to be a neighbor. I opened the door and stopped breathing for a second. Zoe. She stood there in Flat's sundress, her hair tied back in a low knot. But it wasn't her face that held me in place. It was her belly, round, obvious. She rested a hand on it, almost protective, almost performative. "I know I wasn't invited," she said quickly, eyes darting to the side. I thought maybe you'd want to know." I didn't say anything, not at first, just studied her face. She looked older, softer in some ways, but not fragile. Not anymore. "I want my child to know you," she said, and that's when I stepped back just enough to let her in. No hug, no welcome party, just space. We sat in the kitchen, the same table where she'd once scribbled thank you notes to scholarship committees I helped her apply to. I poured tea. She brought her own silence. It was strange, tender maybe, but also brittle. Like if we spoke too fast, too direct, it might break. Dinner was quiche and fruit salad. I didn't dress it up. I wasn't trying to impress. Zoe picked at the crust, then finally looked up. "I know I don't deserve another chance," she whispered. I said nothing. She glanced down, then added, "But maybe the baby does." Her voice cracked on the word baby. I wanted to reach across the table. I wanted to tell her that of course I'd be there, that I'd hold that child, sing lullabies, stock their bookshelf like I had hers. But what I said instead was steady, low, final. "Let's not start again," I said. She blinked once, then nodded, not in anger, not even in disappointment, just understanding. Like she knew this was the best she could get, like she finally saw the difference between access and forgiveness. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. "Happy birthday," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside was a silver pendant, a book charm. I didn't ask if she remembered the summer I taught her to read at age 5, back when she kept confusing quiet and quite and cried over every cue in sight. I didn't ask, but I knew. And maybe she did too. After dessert, store-bought cake, and 2 scoops of vanilla, she stood. I should go. I walked her to the door. This time we didn't linger, but just before she stepped off the porch, she turned back. "If it's a girl," she said softly, "I'm naming her Evelyn." Then she was gone. I stood there a long time after the car disappeared down the drive. Not crying, not smiling, just processing. Forgiveness doesn't always look like a second chance. Sometimes it's just peace. And tonight, that was enough. You can't plan legacy, not the real kind, not the kind that breathes, that evolves, that forgives even if it doesn't forget. It's been almost a year since the wedding, since the toast, since I stood alone on the beach with salt on my tongue and ice in my chest. Now, the air smells like fresh ground beans and overambition. The cafe sits on a corner in Savannah that most people forget exists 2 blocks past the old library, tucked between a record shop and a dry cleaner that still takes cash only. Michael calls it Third Verse because he told me one night while painting the sign himself, every good poem deserves more than a second chance. The grant came through 3 months after the conservatorship case was dismissed. It wasn't large, but it was enough. He didn't ask for it. I offered, and he only accepted when he knew the terms were clean. No strings, no speeches, just belief. The first night it opened, I sat in the back. Didn't bring flowers. Didn't ask for a mic, just watched. Zoe was behind the counter. Apron hair tied up sleeves rolled not for show, but for work. She didn't notice me at first, or maybe she did, but pretended not to. Either way, I was okay with it. I didn't need to be acknowledged. Sometimes presence is enough. She passed lattes to guests with a quiet smile, cleared tables between poems, nodded along during a reading about fractured families and crooked healing. She didn't speak that night, but she showed up, and in her eyes, there was something new. Not guilt, not grief, just motion. Something was rebuilding, not from demand, but from dignity. I sipped my tea chamomile with a dash of lemon and stared at the wall where Michael had painted a line in sweeping script, "Love is louder," in whispers. And I thought, yes, that's exactly it. Every Tuesday, I return. I sit in the same spot near the window with the chipped frame and the peeling sill. I watch the place grow, and I feel something, not like pride, not exactly, more like peace, like watching a garden bloom where you once stood with bare hands and too much hope. Back home, I've started writing again, longhand ink to paper. The memoir begins simply, Love Without Receipts. It's not about revenge or bitterness or even regret. It's about seeing the places where love bloomed and the cracks it couldn't grow through. I write in the mornings, with coffee and quiet. At night, I leave the light on in the study, not because I'm working, but because I like the way it glows through the front window. People think someone inside has something to say. They're right. In the hallway near the door hangs a small frame now. Simple black wood, cream matte. Inside it, the name tag from Zoe's wedding. Still wrinkled, still cheap, still stinging. It reads, "The Wallet with Wrinkles." And beneath it in my handwriting a note, "What woke me up." I see it every day, not with anger, but with clarity. Because legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we choose to begin when no one's looking. The air smelled different this time, saltier, wiser. I stood at the edge of the same shoreline where nearly a year ago my granddaughter said I do, and I nearly came undone. Only this time I wasn't in a cocktail dress, no name tag, no expectation, no applause behind a champagne flute. Just me, barefoot, gray cardigan clutched in one hand, and in the other the small silver urn that had lived in my nightstand drawer for 5 quiet years. Robert's ashes. We'd scattered some in the mountains, some under the dogwood tree in our old backyard, but I saved the last, not for tradition, but for timing. And today felt right, not because it was an anniversary, not because anyone told me to, but because I'd finally found something worth saying out loud. I walked slowly toward the surf, the hem of my jeans brushing damp sand. The wind tugged at my hair, and it felt like a hand I used to know, one I still loved. I knelt not to mourn, but to honor. I opened the lid and whispered, "Robert." I found my voice, darling, and with that I let go. The ashes took flight in a breeze that didn't ask permission. They scattered like soft secrets swallowed into the waves. I stayed there for a while, watching the horizon melt into sky. I thought of what we'd built, what we lost, and what I'd rebuilt on my own. Behind me, laughter erupted, high-pitched, gleeful. A group of kids tore across the sand, chasing kites and seagulls and whatever else children believe in before the world tells them to stop. One of them, a girl in pigtails with freckles and scabbed knees, looked up and squealed, "Hi, Miss E." I turned, smiled. Not the kind of smile you offer strangers to be polite. No, this one came from somewhere deeper, like it had been waiting, just beneath my ribs, for permission to live again. "Hi, sweetheart," I called back. She waved once, then darted off, her laughter trailing behind her like a ribbon. I dusted the sand off my palms and stood. The tide touched my toes and then receded like it knew I needed one last word before leaving the past behind. I turned to go shoulders square steps shore, and just before the dunes swallowed me up, I said it not for anyone else, but for me. I may be old, but I am not forgotten, and I am not for sale. You know, looking back, I realized this story wasn't just about money, or betrayal, or even about a grandmother being disrespected. It was about identity, dignity, and the quiet strength it takes to reclaim both, especially when the people you love make you feel like your only value is in your wallet. For most of my life, I believed giving was love, but I've learned love without boundaries isn't generosity, it's surrender. I had to lose my role in the family to find my place in the world. And maybe that's the lesson here. Legacy isn't built on what you give, but on who you become. Your worth isn't measured in dollars, titles, or how many times you say yes. It's found in your voice, in your nose, in the way you walk away with grace and still leave the door open for healing. So now I want to ask you, have you ever been made to feel disposable simply because you gave too much? Have you ever had to choose between peace and people who wouldn't change? If this story made you feel seen or even challenged you to rethink your boundaries, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you're someone who values stories that dive deep into human truths, stories that remind us we're never too old or too broken to begin again, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss what's coming next. Because sometimes one story can change everything. Change